Hey everybody, Guy here from Chit Chat. Thanks so much for continuing to listen. We appreciate you kind of bringing us along. You know, whether you're dropping kids off at sports today, or maybe you're folding laundry, or you're cooking dinner, all of those things. We just really appreciate you coming along for this journey with us. I just got done recording a really fun podcast with Dr. Ken Holmen, which he told me to call him Ken, so I'll just say Ken joined us for the podcast today. And we got to talk about CentraCare and what is CentraCare and what's CentraCare doing now. He used a hockey analogy. I'm not a hockey guy, but I was able to figure it out. Where's the puck now and where will the puck be? And so we just got to have some of that conversation. And really fun conversation. And ultimately, the conversation is about our community and why we're here and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to be a part of and leave behind. CentraCare, St. Cloud Hospital is very old, and CentraCare has been around for such a long time. And as they're looking at their past of where they have been and how that affects where they're going, what kind of legacy they want to be a part of. So it's a super fun conversation with Ken today, and thankful that you guys are listening and excited for you to hear it now. Dr. Ken, thank you so much for coming and joining us on the podcast. Really appreciate having you here.
Well, thank you kindly for the invite, and looking forward to the conversation.
Sweet. So, Dr. Holmen, would you just...
Call me Ken, by the way.
Great. Yeah. Deal. All right. Hi, Ken.
Everybody calls me Ken.
Okay. Yeah. Great. It's good. Yeah. Ken, just maybe would you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what do you do?
Well, probably the best way to describe me is I'm kind of a chunky old white guy. Okay. I'm the head of CentraCare. Uh-huh. I've been here for a little over 10 years now, and it's been the joy of my life to be in this region and help provide health care and many other services to our communities.
How did you end up in St. Cloud?
Well, there's that old adage, the doors open and doors close, and I suspect my life is much like that. I grew up in a small town in Iowa. I was born in 1952, so I'm an older guy.
Okay.
And my mom was a nurse. And in our small school, I loved school.
Yeah.
I loved sports. I loved theater. And when you're a small school, you have the opportunity to start in everything.
Yeah,
right.
That's great.
You star in the plays. You star in sports. You're very busy in the community. Small towns are very community-centered. So I had a marvelous childhood in my small town in Iowa, and hadn't really thought much about my career. I knew I was going to go off to college somewhere. And as a good Lutheran boy, my choices were somewhat limited to St. Olaf and Augsburg and Concordia and Luther and Wartburg.
And which one did you pick?
Augsburg.
Okay.
And because I wanted to kind of get out of a small town. I was interested, and also at that time, Augsburg had a great chemistry department. And so I went to Augsburg for my undergraduate degree. I was a chemistry and biology major. And when I was at Augsburg, a local guy who was a friend of my parents and grandparents, his name was John Hansen. John was the founder and owner of Winnebago, which is the travel trailer company. Yeah. And so he was quite wealthy. And he took an interest in me, and so he subsequently paid for about 14 years of my education.
Wow.
And it's a story that is not widely known. I'm the only kid he ever did it for. And so that certainly took some of the worries out related to my medical school, my residency program, postdoctoral work, et cetera. And so I finally finished school when I was 33. And one of the stories that I like about, and it's why I'm so passionate about community. So I called John. Remember, I'm 33 now. I got a couple of kids. And I said, John, thank you so much for supporting my education, and I'd like to pay you back. And I can still hear his voice saying, Ken, do you think I need the money? And I said, well, probably not. He said, you're right. You figure out what to do to pay it back. And so I set up a bunch of scholarships. But it really emphasized this notion of how we are brothers and sisters keepers to some extent, whether it's within a small community or even a larger community, or whether it's paying for education or taking care of people's health or their mental health needs, whatever it is. We share the same ecosystem, and John had a huge influence on my life.
When you were, going through those years of school that someone else was footing the bill for, did you feel like a sense of burden? I want to make good on this investment by John?
Well, I think most of us don't want to disappoint people who love us or support us.
Yeah.
So that's certainly there. That said, there were parts of my training that were not the most comfortable for me. So my background is I come from a very conservative, small-town atmosphere. And academic healthcare and academic medicine is very competitive. And though while I was a good student, I would not consider myself to be a gunner, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so there were aspects of school that were challenging for me. I wondered whether I fit. I think everybody wonders whether they fit at some point in time in their life. That said, I persevered. My wife has supported me and my family, my mom and dad. And so all in all, I have been blessed in so many different ways. And it started me on a career that probably like you have no clue what's happening as those doors open.
Yeah. You know, when you kind of see the trajectory of your career and, you know, just like the different roles that you've had inside of healthcare, do you look back at watching mom be a nurse? Do you think that was impactful at all in watching her and seeing how she approached people and served people and cared for, you know, their physical needs, that kind of imparted some of that on you?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily going to share this story, but I will because you opened the door. So my mom is a nurse, and we had one physician in our town. And the one physician we had was a brusque, a gentleman. Envision that back 50, 60, you know, what I would call large white male syndrome. So I'm accepted to medical school, and my mother says, you know, Ken, when you go off to become a physician, you don't have to behave like Dr. So-and-so. Remember that you're from a small town. Remember your mom's a nurse. And remember your roots. So I take that to heart. Now, fast forward some 18 years later, when I'm chief of surgery at Children's Hospital. And the head nurse there comes up to me one day and she says, Dr. Holmen, can I have a word with you? And I said, of course. I'm from Iowa. My mom's a nurse. Now, I'm thinking that in my head. And so she says, do you mind if we do it in my office? And I said, of course, that's fine. And I went to her office, and I can still see it to this day and picture it. And I go in and sit down. She says, Dr. Holmen, do you mind if I be very straightforward? And I said, please do. I'm from a small town in Iowa, and my mom's a nurse. And she says, can I use a mild swear word on this or not?
Yeah.
So she says, Dr. Holmen, you're an asshole.
Okay.
And I was just floored, because I thought I'd failed my mother, right? And betrayed my roots. So it started a journey for me early on in my leadership career to think, how do we lead? Now, obviously, as you progress in leadership ranks, you have to make difficult decisions. Not everybody likes me. I understand that. Not everybody approves the decisions that I or we or our orgs. I get that. But it taught me that the notion of who we are as a people is extremely important and in how we lead. So that was a pivotal moment in my career. Most of my career early on was in clinical medicine. I'm an anesthesiologist, did mostly kids, mostly cardiac stuff, and had a great career. There were a couple of leaders in healthcare systems in the metropolitan area who got to know me fairly well. And I had kind of an atypical trajectory, probably compared to most clinicians, who encouraged me to expand my wings into broader executive leadership roles. So this coincides then with a period in American healthcare when there was an interest in having physicians lead large, complex organizations. So even though we didn't have MBAs or a lot of management experience, HR, complex finances, all that, there was an interest in having physicians take over leadership roles. And so one thing led to another, and I am sitting with you here today. That was my journey.
Up until that moment, what kinds of people or what kinds of skill sets were leading large health organizations?
Typically MHAs or MBAs.
Okay.
Very tight business focus, usually around profitability, margin, capital, buying stuff, that kind of things. I'm not saying they weren't good people.
Yeah, for sure.
But they did not have a clinical medical background.
I can imagine how important knowing firsthand what it's like to be in an operating theater and knowing what it's like to see patients every day and how the decisions that get made in that office actually like make their way down, to the people that you're serving. how having someone with that knowledge and that skill set leading could actually be really, really helpful. So it's a neat shift that maybe happened.
Yeah, it is helpful. That said, it has nothing to do with how effective I am.
Okay.
So let me explain that to you.
Great.
Leading large, complex organizations, in many respects, has to do with what I would call the discernment around making difficult decisions, as well as complex decision making. In medicine, most of the decision making tools that we employ are binary.
Okay.
Do this, don't do that.
Yep.
Whether it's a prescription, a surgery, a procedure, when to see someone, etc. And the decision-making process when you're a clinician is fundamentally based on a mindset that you own, based on your training, reading the literature, what's best practice. And it generally is not inclusive of a broader set of team members. Do I make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas leading large, complex organizations is all about creating a context for listening, understanding the key drivers that are important in making the correct decision, and then rallying a team around it. So oddly enough, that notion of clinical background is extremely important to me. It does not guarantee success because it's a different set of tools.
Obviously, do you experience the value of having those skill sets?
Oh, absolutely, because it gives you a sense of, I think, two perspectives that are frequently lost in corporate healthcare America. One is at the end of the day, we are and should be about our patients. And when you deal with, I'm going to use a technical term, zeros omitted. Zeros omitted are on financial statements because there's so much money involved, you remove 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 zeros. We're talking billions of dollars. And lots of times in the corporate world, we forget when zeros are omitted, you're actually talking about a person. We're talking about a guy. We're talking about your family. And so the challenges that I think that we recognize related to having a patient focus or family focus or community focus is central. And I think that has stayed with me, I hope, during my career. And the second focus is about our team members. Again, not about zeros omitted, not about building a $400 million plant or whatever. It is about patients and our team members. And that is something that I hope I still take with me in my decision making. And I know that my team members do the same thing.
You graduated from residency when you were in your early 30s. And then how many years did you work as an anesthesiologist? Did I say that right? Anesthesiologist?
Correct.
Before you jumped into some admin or leadership positions?
So I got into serious higher level peer executive roles 20 years ago.
Okay.
This month.
All right.
January 2015.
Wow.
No, 2005.
2005.
Before that, for the previous 25, 30 years, I was all clinical. Certainly, I was chairman of the department and on boards, but from a pure...
Where you were doing some of both.
Some of both. But a pure executive role happened in 2005 when I was 57 years old.
If you can just remember back to that first day that your alarm went off and it was to head to a purely administrative job, what did that feel like? You were heading to work, but for the first time in your life, it wasn't to go and actually be a doctor. What did that feel like?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But here's what I do remember. I did not do well the first year. Because my default decision-making was binary.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was not team-based. My default decision-making was about making a diagnosis and not understanding the ambiguity of decision-making. And actually, the CEO of the company that hired me met with me and said, Ken, you're struggling. I'll give you words that I still remember to this day.
Great.
So we are having an executive meeting. There are 8 of us. It's a very large company. And we go around the room, and the CEO asks all for our opinion on a complex issue. And she gets to me, and I said, well, you gotta do this and do this and do that. She said, what's this you stuff? Where's the we? And that was an aha moment for me.
Wow.
Where is the we? We need to do this.
Yeah.
It wasn't about you.
We're all at this table together.
We're at the table together. And that, again, was a very enlightening moment for me from a leadership perspective. And that changed the way I did, and subsequently I continued to learn.
Yeah.
I had the benefit of getting other formal education, whether it's at Ivy League schools related to decision making and HR and finance and all that stuff. But I'm still a clinician at heart.
Yeah.
This stuff might be very boring to you, by the way, when I'm talking about it. So I appreciate your patience.
Here's the deal. I don't think it's boring at all.
Yeah.
Like I think that these kinds of conversations, just like real conversations with real people, are really, really fun. It's the kind of content that I enjoy. And I guess since it's my podcast, that's what everybody else is going to get. So I'm thankful for it. So, and it's fun to like hear people's story and kind of how they got to where they are and what kind of makes them tick.
I want to emphasize what you just said, a person's story. In the complexity of America and the busyness, the social media, we forget that everybody's story is extraordinarily personal.
Yeah.
Because in healthcare, which is what I am most familiar with and what my passion is, we are always dealing with polar conversations. Healthcare is a really big business, and it's really personal.
Yeah.
So how do we understand the personal nature when in the context when you have thousands of employees or billions of dollars in revenue, that we have to connect that macro with the micro? Because the end point is not macro. The end point is personal.
Yeah. It's someone sitting on the end of that hospital table.
Correct.
Yeah. Waiting for the doctor to come back in and give news.
Yeah.
Yeah. One way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in central Minnesota. I went to high school in Sartell and with the exception of just a stint in the cities for college and meeting my wife. I've been a central Minnesota boy basically my whole life. And so I've seen the growth of CentraCare over the years. And it seems like right now there's so much like really, really interesting stuff, really, really neat stuff. I mean, one of the big things that feels like it is coming kind of in relationship to our community and CentraCare is the med school. I've heard you talk about it a couple of times, but would you maybe just tell us a little bit more? Why is it important for a community of our size to have a med school, and what does that mean for us here as just kind of, non-medical central Minnesotans? I'm
going to have you put that on the side burner for just a minute.
Okay.
And I will get there.
Great.
So you're getting to a question is what does Ken do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, I have two functionalities.
Okay.
One is to monitor what we're doing today in service of our communities, our team members, and our patients. And the other, which is extraordinarily important, is paint a landscape for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
You're asking a tomorrow question.
All right.
And I want to talk about tomorrow.
The crane on Highway 15 also says it's says it's a today thing too. But I get it.
And so when we do planning for what healthcare looks like in the last 10 years, it is very reasonable, and I'm acutely aware that folks in our community don't understand why CentraCare does this or does that, or why we've grown. Some of our team members don't get it or don't understand it and actually might disapprove. I get that. I understand that. But the planning that we do in conjunction with our board, remember we're a not-for-profit community-governed organization. I have a board that I report to. And we have boards throughout our organization in every town that we're in. And so the strategic planning effort that we do needs to understand where the puck is today, using a hockey analogy, and where
we're in Minnesota.
And where the puck's going to be.
Sure.
And so the work of CentraCare over the last 10 years since I've been here, and the work that we're continuing with the med school about where the puck's going to be in 10 years or 100 years, is about identifying key issues.
Yeah.
And so one of the key issues is education. We are at a weird juncture in American history. We now have more folks over the age of 65 than under 18. And that has several important dynamics. One is as you age, your healthcare needs go up. And number two is we have fewer young people in the pipeline to help take care of you. So that need for our medical school is driven by a strategic imperative that's relevant not only today, but 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years down the line. And so the medical school is the first new medical school in Minnesota in 53 years.
Wow.
And it will allow us to understand that by training folks locally, we have a far better chance of having them stay local.
Yeah, that's great.
So the average age of the physician in rural Minnesota is 59. A third of them are going to retire in 5 to 7 years. And that's important for a lot of different ways. I'm going to catch that again in a minute.
Okay.
But the medical school is a joint venture It'll start this fall. We're accepting students right now. 24 students a year times 4 is 96 students is a total. Additionally,
So it'll ramp up each year.
it'll ramp up
Yeah.
each year.
Got it.
So we're having it all the facilities, housing, classrooms, et cetera, at the plaza site. Additionally, I want to mention our other educational activities. For every physician we train, we need another 15 to 17 support people.
Wow.
Could be an electrician, X-ray tech, nurses, IT people, communications people. We need all sorts of folks to help deliver great care to our communities. And so we have a number of educational efforts in all those areas. In the past, healthcare organizations just provided healthcare. But to address that strategic imperative, we need to get into education. We're in education with our public school systems, with our private colleges and universities, and our public colleges and universities, all aimed at filling the strategic imperative. There are people that says, well, why is CentraCare becoming a medical school? I get why they ask that question. But the answer to the question is strategic imperative to make sure that we're relevant in 100 years.
St. Cloud Hospital is how many years old?
1880s.
Yeah. And so to forecast ahead 100 years is it feels like a really, really, really smart thing to do, especially when you're dealing with a history that is 140 plus years old.
And so other aspects of what we have become, people say, why do you grow so much? I have a firm belief that we are better together. And I'll go sideways for just a minute.
Okay.
Growing up in a small town in Iowa and playing sports, we loved to beat the crap out of Lake Mills and Belmont. In other words, Friday night football is a normative part of community life.
Yep. And probably the whole town shows up.
Whole town shows up. And so if you attract a new business, grocery store to your town, you won, Lake Mills lost.
Yeah.
Same thing in healthcare.
Yeah.
If you recruited a doctor for Forest City, and Lake Mills did, more people would come to you.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge is in today's society, this notion of competition does not improve healthcare because everybody needs care.
Yeah.
And by collaborating, and we demonstrated this during the pandemic, we have all of our hospitals on the same EMR, electronic medical record.
Yep.
And we have another 14 non-CentraCare facilities on our EMR, which allows nearly instantaneous communication to say, how do we do this?
Yep.
In fact, many of our clinicians are rotating around. They do outreach. And so the notion of a team of teams rather than Friday night football is extraordinarily important. So the value proposition for organizations to join us is simply that, understanding the end objective. The end objective is to provide better care to humans.
Yeah.
Recognizing that somebody might say, well, I've lost my independence. I understand that, but there's also this sense of interdependence. With today's technology and the way that we function, we need to be better together.
Yeah.
And I use a practical example. Last year, Americans ordered more stuff online than they did in person. And so just think how that's impacted Main Street in all of our small towns.
Yeah.
If I go back to my small town, Main Street's deserted.
Yeah.
So an important functionality, getting to the next area of strategic planning, besides education, is economic viability for our communities.
Yeah.
Healthcare is the number one economic viability, generally speaking, in all the towns we're in. Now, there might be an industry that has a lot of employees, but we are a source of economic engine for that town, a source of community pride. And so this notion of the presence of CentraCare in all of our communities, is it about healthcare? Absolutely. But it's about more than that.
Yeah.
It's about Main Street survivability. It's about community pride. It's about, can we hire a teacher, right? It's about, can we attract a business? Well, do you have healthcare?
Yeah.
And so it's broader than just healthcare. It's an accountability for the overall 100-year sustainability of a model of life that I love. How do we make that happen together?
Is CentraCare the largest employer in St. Cloud?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I think that we're probably the 5th or 6th largest employer in the state.
Okay.
So
Wow. And of the ones that are above, how many do you think are healthcare systems?
most of them are.
Yeah, okay.
Mayo is probably right up there.
Yep.
3M has a lot of employees.
Yeah, of course.
But we're in the top 10 for sure.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And with that comes an accountability.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that as we plan our plans for the next 100 years that we are mindful of the impact on our communities.
In a second, I want you to maybe just touch on just a little bit more about the med school. Sure. And I drive by it every day. So I'm just, it's a fun thing to like kind of watch, keep growing and building. But real quick, my mom would say, if you said something, if you maybe got caught saying something not nice about someone, you had to say something nice. So could you say what's one nice thing about Lake Mills? For the people from Lake Mills who might be listening, what could you say that would maybe assuage them that that you like them?
One of my best friends is from Lake Mills. Okay. Yeah. And they had a really good A&W root beer stand that on Friday night we would all drive to after games.
Okay.
Great.
So after clobbering Lake Mills at home,
correct.
Beat them, we're going to go drink some root beer together.
And you have to go through Lake Mills to get to Forest City. Because Lake Mills, if you take 35 south, that's the exit. You take the Lake Mills. It doesn't mention Forest City, but it mentions Lake Mills. Yeah. So you had to go through Lake Mills to get to Forest City.
Got it. My best friend from childhood married an Iowa girl, ended up in Lake Mills. So really? I've actually been to that little part of the world.
Yeah, it's a cool little town.
Lots of Dutch people, right? Lots of Dutch people.
And Norwegians.
Okay, great. All right, maybe just tell me a little bit more about the med school. And so in the next 4 years, there's going to be 100-ish med school students that are here. And do you have hopes, like of those, each class, if you're graduating 20 to 24 of these, doctors, how many of them are you hoping that we can actually keep here in our community?
Let me talk a little bit more about the medical school, then I'll answer your question. Okay. So the medical school and the work at the plaza represents about a $300 million investment in that campus, the 3 cranes that you drive by. Yeah. This is on top of roughly $250 million investment that we made in our regional facilities, whether it's Long Prairie down to Redwood Falls. So it, again, reflects that strategic commitment to being in our communities for the next 100 years. I view the academic mission, and that's the language I use, to be multi-layered. So let's talk first about the medical school.
Okay.
24 students a year, 96 kids. They'll get their education there 4 years. And once you finish medical school, you go on to a residency or postgraduate training, and that is in family practice, general surgery, cardiology, obstetrics, whatever. And so,
is that here, or are you like applying around the country again for those kinds of things?
We are building these residency programs as well, because once you matriculate and graduate a medical school, we want them to get some training with us. Yeah. And so it also then involves creating a rural health research institute that we're well underway. Yeah. Academic institutions not only embrace an academic mission, they embrace a clinical mission, but they also embrace the mission of using research to improve care. Healthcare outcomes in rural America are not as good as they should be. And there are not reasons for that would take another 5-hour podcast. But suffice it to say, just trust me, that we can get better. And we do pretty good, and we can get better. And so this notion of training our own is relevant in that we have a much higher chance of having them stay. So last year, we graduated folks from our family practice residency in St. Cloud. All of them stayed in central Minnesota.
Cool.
All of them. Yeah. And so by taking that model, we want to give an experience for these kids to say, whoa, this is pretty cool. I can live on a lake. I can be part of a family. I can participate in a community, whether it's your church or your business or United Way, and have kids and be safe. And it's been a cool story. So last Friday, we are starting to accept kids. So when you start something new, you're worried, is this thing going to fill up?
Right.
And so the last numbers I saw, we had roughly 160 folks from around the country put St. Cloud as their number one choice.
Wow.
That's remarkable.
That's incredible. And it doesn't exist yet.
It doesn't exist. And we had 1,200 people listed as their second choice.
Wow.
So we will be full on day one, and we're excited about it. And our assistant dean is Dr. Jill Amsbury, well known in town. She's a pediatrician. Has been a part of the team that's calling them. And she has related that all of them cry when they hear they're accepted. And so it's not only an important professional landmark for us and them, it's also very personal.
Yeah. Obviously those students, they've been working so hard for such a long time to do this, and like to get that call that they're accepted, that must be very, very overwhelming.
There's another thing that I want to mention about the medical school that's important, and that is to have kids from central Minnesota say it's possible, right? Medical school is very competitive. The average GPA probably is 3.6, 3.7. You have to do very well on standardized testing called the MCAT, and as well as they're looking for a personal connection to their community. And sometimes folks in rural, I'll use a statistic.
Okay.
20% of the kids in Minnesota live in rural communities. 20%.
You said 20, yeah.
Yeah. Only about 5% of the folks in medical school are from rural. So you'd think if there was a comparative that, but there's an underrepresentation by rural kids in medical school for a number of reasons. Did they think they couldn't do it? Did they not have the right mentorship? Did they not have the right preparation? Whatever it is, did they think they couldn't afford it? And so these are the things we're trying to address by creating a remarkable opportunity. And we've been blessed to have 3 types of funding to make this work. This stuff is not cheap.
Yeah.
And so one is the legislature has been very helpful. Number 2 is CentraCare Operations. Our core business model supports this. But most excitingly is the CentraCare Foundation. So we set a $50 million 5-year goal to help support the medical school. And we're at over $31 million in about 14 months.
Wow.
And I have just been just really deeply appreciative of the generosity of individuals and corporations that have opened their wallets and their hearts to this notion of, we're going to do it differently. We're going to support Main Street. We're going to improve health care. We're going to create an opportunity. As I said, we like to think we're the little engine that didn't. I want to be the little engine that did.
Yeah. Sweet friend of mine, Denny Peterson, Dr. Denny Peterson, was on the podcast months ago, and hearing him talk about why he loves, just medicine in general, but why he loves rural medicine and why it's important to, to encourage young doctors to pursue a different kind of life and the kind of one-on-one relationship. When you're in a small community, hearing him talk about how, you're there at a birth, and then if you just stay in that community, you're going to follow that baby, through a giant chunk of their life, and how, doing that for a community is just so rewarding. It was so sweet to hear him talk about that. And, that's what he's given his life to, and now is, helping teach and stuff too. But the issue of getting more and more doctors to pick rural is great. And I hope that the med school does a big part of that. When you use the word rural, is there a definition, or is there a criteria? Is St. Cloud, are we considered rural because we're not Minneapolis?
So there are different definitions of rural, and we decided to adopt this phrase, making rural life healthier. And we actually had a conversation about what does rural mean.
Yeah,
is it derogatory? Right? Is it fit a demographic definition by the U.S. government or the state, depending on, are you 50,000 and greater? We landed on rural as a sense of community. I'll go sideways for 2 points.
Okay.
One of the things that I have valued most about my upbringing and being, I live in Cold Spring, and being part of CentraCare, is this remarkable sense of community. When you live in a large metropolitan area, society and relationships can be complex and distant. Whereas when you see somebody regularly buying groceries, getting gas, going to church, your classmates are in the same school, there's a different sense of sharedness, different sense of purpose. And I think that is the valuable aspect that I hear in the word rural. It's meant to be an aggregator and not a discriminator. Rural is who we are. I'm a rural kid. Now, granted, I spent most of my professional career in the metropolitan area, but I still consider myself a rural kid. And I think that is true not only of our communities, but it's true of the team members at CentraCare. There are folks that will listen to this podcast that say, well, I don't have a choice but to go to CentraCare. Right? I have to.
Sure.
Because we're the only game in town. I understand that. But I'd like to reassure them that our team members have that same sense of commitment. Because the patients they're seeing might be their son Johnny's best friend's grandparent. So that shared sense of community is felt by our team members. And in fact, it comes up all the time as we work with our team members to have them understand this shared sense of community. And what's really been interesting as CentraCare has grown is that growth has had certainly challenges, but it also has allowed that notion of shared purpose become more evident. Because now folks are coming from different places because they hear about us. I got an email last week from a lady from Wisconsin that had heard about our heart program. And she drove up here, had a complex procedure, was done, sent me an email later, and said, what a remarkable sense of family. She used that word family. And so I think our team members enjoy that. And healthcare is stressful enough the way it is.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
But if you can have a sense of teamwork and joy and shared purpose, that's a good thing.
Yeah. You've worked in a number of communities. You're from Iowa. You worked in the Metro bunch. What are some of the things that you think make Central Minnesota unique and special?
I think a couple of things. One is the sense of geographic connectedness, right?
Yeah.
There's a geographic connectedness. It could be a river, it could be a road, it could be the school system, it could be the church, it could be the whatever. So I think there's a geographic connectedness. You see someone, right?
Yeah.
I have seen you twice in the last month and a half. If you were doing this in the cities, I'd probably see you only unless we were doing something.
Yep.
Right. So there's a geographic connectedness. I also think probably more important, there's a value connectedness. And I don't like to use the word conservative or liberal. I'd like to say that all of us, no matter your political viewpoint, has a sense of shared perspective of who we are together and the sense of how we are in Congress with each other, despite your position on whatever.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. So geographic connectedness and this shared sense of who we are as a people.
So back to your kind of like hockey analogy, where the puck is today, and where will the puck be in 10 years? Like what do you dream about for CentraCare in the next decade?
So I mentioned education. So we're fully invested in education. Number two is workforce. Workforce sounds so corporate, but how do we make sure that everybody in our organization, no matter where you work, feels valued and belonged and fairly compensated? And those are challenging concepts because there's both an objective and a subjective component.
Yeah.
Do you feel valued is a subjective component.
It is.
On the other hand, it's also objective, and they say how much you get paid per hour, per year. And so we need to do a lot of work on understanding how our folks feel about that and make sure that we are competitive. I think another major challenge, and you're seeing this a lot in the newspaper, is the economic challenges around healthcare. There will be probably 10 hospitals, mostly rural in America, that will close this month. We've had 3 or 4 close in Minnesota in the last year. And the economics of healthcare are very challenging. And people say, "What? I mean, you got billions of dollars. What's all that about?" And we still have not answered. I'm going to go completely philosophical for a minute.
Okay, great.
We have not answered the question yet in America whether healthcare is a right or a privilege.
Yeah.
In America, you might want to buy a Rolex watch, right? That's, I don't even know how much they cost, but let's say they cost $10,000.
That's about right.
And if you can't afford one, you don't get it.
Right.
But if you want Rolex health care in America, let's say a kidney transplant, heart transplant, total knees are probably more on the Timex scale. People think they should have them. And by the way, I agree with them. But we have not answered that economic problem of how we pay for stuff that people don't have to necessarily have a personal accountability for. So to get to the more brass tacks of this, 70% of our revenue for CentraCare comes from a government source.
Yeah.
It could be state or federal government. So when I say that, I mentioned we have an aging population. That's Medicare. We have a number of folks who are on Medicaid because of income.
Yep.
And so when 70% of the money that we get comes from the federal government, that immediately enters a political realm in which legislators decide how much we get paid. We don't decide how much we get paid by anybody. The federal government, the state government, and everybody tells us, here's what you will get. And in general, government reimbursement does not cover our cost. So the question is, how do you stay in business when you lose dollars with everything you do? And that is the challenge that we face for the future, because more and more folks have don't have commercial insurance, which pays us at a par for our costs. And so finances are really a challenge. So the opportunity for us is to have everybody understand that.
Yeah.
And have our team members fully engaged in the fact is, how do we use our stuff more reliably? How do we provide the right care at the right time in the right place to the right person?
Yeah.
And the challenge, of course, is that everybody has a perception, a patient, a team member, about what the right care at the right time at the right place is. And so, again, you run into that subjective as what do I think? And we have objective, which is data. We know a lot of data about healthcare.
Yeah.
But if you don't think that's good data or is in conflict with what you want, we have a problem.
Yeah.
When is the last time that somebody has gone into a car dealership and the salesman says, you don't need a new car. I see you got a nice looking car right out there, right? Doesn't happen in capitalism. So one of the challenges we have is that much of America has non-capitalistic components because it's been removed from certain types of economic principles. So that's a major challenge. Finances. How are we sustainable for the next 150 years? The next is quality. We need to improve quality and access to care. That requires active patient participation. Some patients are very actively engaged in improving their health, and we got a lot of folks in outstate Minnesota that are not very actively engaged in improving their health. And I could. This is not meant to be a political statement at all. Smoking,
Sure.
Eating habits, helmets. All these are things that are personal choice.
Yeah.
But if we were to optimize health and lower costs, requires active engagement by our folks.
Yeah.
So how do we have that personal conversation that is not demeaning to them, but say, how about that? Take vaccination. I mean, we have a lot of anti-vaccination, and vaccinations not only prolong life, but it's very cost effective.
Yeah, and all the preventative things that we can do every single day,
Correct.
hopefully, so that we don't end up actually needing healthcare, farther down. I was in the chamber leadership program last year. I graduated last year, and we had a Health and Human Services Day, and I'm going to forget his name, but he's your legal counsel or
Santo Cruz?
Santo.
Yeah.
He came, and he's a compelling speaker. He's
He's from Melrose.
Is he? Oh, that's great. Staying local.
Very, very talented individual.
Yeah. He was entertaining. He was easy to listen to because he was compelling, and he just laid out kind of the problem in relationship to finances inside of healthcare in a kind of way that I hadn't heard before. That was very helpful and very, very informative.
So getting into finance a little bit more is that I know nothing about your finances, but every day or every month or every year, you and your wife have a conversation. Do I buy a new car? Can I make whatever it is? Yep. And you make those decisions in the best way possible. So I want you to translate that now to the billion-dollar scale for CentraCare, where we're trying to make the best decision, discern the best decision to spend a lot of money. And when we spend money on stuff, I'll pick the medical school because we talked. There are some people that say, boy, I get that investment big time. And there will be others in our organization that say, yo, dude, what about me? So how do we balance the individual perceptions of somebody that rightfully might feel that this is not the right thing to do, but actually helps us get to where the puck is going to be and ensures long-term sustainability? It's a tough conversation.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we do it at such a smaller scale, but the conversation is real. There are issues today, and we will have issues 10 years from now.
Correct.
And so you need to plan for the future and also not, abandon, good, sound decisions today. But if you're not thinking about how to move forward in the next decade, the likelihood is that you won't, be there in a decade to do that.
A lot of Americans, of course, have 401ks. They're saving for tomorrow. I'm sure they'd like to take the cash out this month and buy something fun with it. But the CentraCare is the same way. We're trying to make smart investments for today, whether it's related to compensation and benefits for our employees and team members, to investing in a medical school, to plaza expansion, to whatever it is that we do. These are all these are not whimsical decisions. They are carefully thought of. They involve many folks, and includes great input from our board, who is made up of community members. Yeah,
well, sweet, Ken. I'm really thankful that you came on the podcast. It's nice to get to know you a little bit and just hear about what you guys are doing. I'm excited to see what our community looks like with the med school. I think everything that I've heard about it, it sounds really, really exciting. And so I'm excited to, the couple of times that I've heard you talk about it, it's just been really encouraging. And
Before we close, I want to give a shout out to so many partners that we have.
Great.
Whether it's St. Cloud State, St. Cloud Tech, our politicians, the city, Sartell, Wade Park, St. Cloud, to the businesses that support us.
Cool.
And I could list them. I would omit someone, but thank you. To our many team members, our nurses, physicians, IT, electricians, EVS, everybody has a fundamentally important role. And so I do want to say thank you. And one of the things I'm probably most proud of is within the context of healthcare systems, one of the most important conversations we have at the board and leadership level is what do we spend on stuff that we don't get paid for, right?
Yeah.
And so last year for CentraCare, that number is about $310 million.
Okay.
Last year, CentraCare provided $310 million in what we call community benefit. And that is a number that does not get a lot of attention. And when I say I'm proud of it, I say I'm proud of it not because of the magnitude number, but it represents the remarkable investments that we do with our community partners, whether it's around reaching out and improving healthcare outcomes in all of our populations, including our diverse populations, to partnering with United Way, Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Charities, you name it. We are so deeply embedded with our public health apparatuses that it is a number that I am proud of. It's not in any financial report, but is a number that we're proud of. And it's something that by having us a trajectory that's financially sustainable, we can continue to do that in the future.
Investing back into the community.
Correct.
Yeah, it's really, really great. Well, sweet Ken, thank you so much. We close every podcast with what we call an unpaid ad. Is there someone, something, or some idea that you think deserves a little shout out today?
So I heard a talk a number of years ago about random acts of kindness.
All right.
And it's something that so this will be kind of about me, but I'm hoping your listeners will adopt this. And so if I'm in a line at a cafeteria, I'll pay for the person behind me or in front of me.
That's sweet.
Or if I'm in a grocery store or a gas station, I'll say, got you covered.
Fun.
They don't know who I am. I don't know, but a random act of kindness. Because I think at the end of the day, the fabric of our society is both very strong and very precious and very fragile. And the more that each of us can do random acts of kindness, opening a door, saying hello, smiling, buying someone a Coke, buy lunch, whatever. Let's flood this community with random acts of kindness.
That's great. So mine will be, my little plug for today is going to be similar. When you park your car, let's say you show up to work or you're downtown or you're at the mall or grocery store, when you walk into wherever you're going, you're already going to walk there. If you walk past or over a piece of garbage, you've missed a small, really insignificant, quote unquote, opportunity to actually just make your community a little bit better. And so if just like looking for those little opportunities to just be a part of bettering our community. And it could be as simple as just like, that's a can of Coke and you could pick it up and put it in the garbage or the recycling.
I love that. I'm a compulsive garbage picker up.
Yeah.
So when we go on vacation with the grandkids, they got a garbage bag with them.
All right.
So when we go for a walk, we're picking up garbage.
That's great.
Yeah. So
Good.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah, Ken, it was really, really a treat. Appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.